In 1974, something extraordinary happened during what should have been a routine channeling session. Jane Roberts, deep in trance, began receiving information so profound that when she emerged, she immediately sealed the transcript away. The pages themselves bore strange properties. Witnesses described text that seemed to shimmer, ink that shifted from blue to silver under lamplight. Seth had revealed 5 specific proofs about consciousness surviving death, each backed by mechanisms he claimed to observe across dimensional boundaries. But Jane feared releasing this material. Her notes, discovered decades later in a locked filing cabinet, contained her handwritten warning. Not until they're ready to understand that death is the ultimate illusion. What made this session different? Seth provided verifiable details about the transition process, information that wouldn't just comfort the grieving, but fundamentally challenge our scientific understanding of consciousness itself. He described precise phenomena that occur at the moment of death, observable signs that prove awareness continues, and most shocking of all, how the deceased can demonstrate their survival to the living. The question isn't whether we survive death, it's whether we're finally ready to handle the proof. When Jane Roberts first began channeling Seth in 1963, she had no idea she was about to become living proof of one of the most revolutionary concepts ever presented to humanity. Seth's first shocking revelation wasn't just theoretical, it was demonstrated night after night through Jane herself, in ways that left even the most skeptical researchers speechless. You see, Seth possessed something most consciousness researchers lack: complete objectivity. Having never been physically incarnated, Seth observed the relationship between consciousness and matter from an entirely unique vantage point. He wasn't bound by the limiting beliefs we absorb from birth about consciousness being trapped inside our skulls. To Seth, the idea that consciousness is produced by the brain was as absurd as claiming a radio creates the music it plays. During the early channeling sessions, something extraordinary began happening. While Seth occupied Jane's physical form, her consciousness didn't simply disappear or go dormant. Instead, it would travel, literally project itself to distant locations while maintaining full awareness. This wasn't imagination or wishful thinking. Jane would return from these experiences with specific, verifiable information about events happening hundreds or even thousands of miles away. One particularly striking example occurred during a 1965 session when Jane, deep in trance, suddenly began describing a fire in a building she'd never seen, in a city she'd never visited. She provided detailed descriptions of the building's layout, the color of the fire trucks, even the appearance of specific firefighters on the scene. When researchers later verified her account, through newspaper reports and eyewitness testimonies, every detail proved accurate. The fire had occurred exactly as Jane described it, at the precise moment she was experiencing it from her living room in Elmira, New York. This wasn't an isolated incident. Session after session, Jane demonstrated what Seth called consciousness projection, the ability of awareness to operate completely independently of physical location. She would describe conversations happening in other countries, weather patterns forming over distant oceans, even private moments in the lives of people she'd never met. Each verification strengthened the evidence for Seth's central claim: consciousness exists as a fundamental force, not as a byproduct of brain chemistry. Seth explained this phenomenon through a radical reversal of everything we've been taught about the mind-body relationship. According to Seth, consciousness doesn't emerge from matter, matter emerges from consciousness. The brain, rather than creating awareness, functions as what he called a focusing mechanism. Just as a radio receiver doesn't create radio waves but tunes into them, the brain tunes into and focuses the much larger field of consciousness that exists beyond physical boundaries. This understanding completely transforms how we view death. If consciousness truly exists independently of the brain, then physical death cannot destroy it. The brain may stop functioning, but the consciousness it was focusing continues to exist in its expanded state. Seth described the moment of death as consciousness simply withdrawing from its physical focus, like, as he put it, taking off a tight shoe that has become uncomfortable. The implications of this first proof are so profound that some of Seth's most detailed teachings about consciousness projection techniques remain too advanced for general discussion. These deeper insights, along with practical methods for developing your own awareness of consciousness beyond the body, are shared exclusively through our free Insights Academy newsletter. Subscribers also receive a complimentary copy of The Kybalion, the foundational text on consciousness principles, for a limited time. Seth's consciousness model also provides a revolutionary framework for understanding near-death experiences. When people report floating above their bodies during medical emergencies, observing events from impossible vantage points, or encountering deceased relatives, they're not hallucinating. They're experiencing what Seth called the natural state of consciousness, awareness operating without physical constraints. The surprise isn't that consciousness can exist outside the body, The surprise is that we've convinced ourselves it can't. To help people grasp this concept, Seth used the analogy of an iceberg. The physical personality, the you that identifies with your name, your history, your daily concerns, represents only the tip visible above water. The vast majority of your consciousness exists below the surface, beyond the reach of physical perception, but very much alive and aware. Death doesn't destroy this larger consciousness. It simply allows the tip to rejoin the greater whole. This revelation directly challenges the materialist worldview that dominates modern science. For decades, researchers have searched for the location of consciousness within the brain, mapping neural networks and studying brain chemistry, all while assuming consciousness must be produced by physical processes. Seth's demonstrations through Jane suggest they've been looking in the wrong place entirely, like trying to find the source of a radio program by dissecting the radio. For those grieving the loss of loved ones, Seth's first proof offers profound comfort. The personality you knew and loved, their humor, their wisdom, their unique way of seeing the world, wasn't created by their brain and therefore wasn't destroyed when their brain stopped functioning. That consciousness continues, expanded beyond physical limitations, still aware, still caring, still connected to you through bonds that transcend physical death. Seth also introduced the concept of inner senses, perceptual abilities that operate beyond the familiar 5 physical senses. These inner senses, according to Seth, continue functioning after death and actually become the primary means of perception in non-physical reality. Dreams, intuitive insights, and moments of inexplicable knowing all represent glimpses of these inner senses at work. Death doesn't eliminate these abilities. It liberates them from physical constraints. The evidence Seth provided through Jane's experiences represents just the beginning. This foundational understanding that consciousness exists independently of the physical brain sets the stage for even more startling revelations about what actually happens when we die, how we navigate non-physical reality, and why we choose to return to physical existence again and again. Each subsequent proof builds upon this cornerstone, revealing a picture of life after death so detailed and so hopeful that it's no wonder these teachings were deemed too dangerous for widespread distribution. When Seth first revealed his second proof to Jane Roberts, he began with a question that would shatter conventional thinking about consciousness. What if I told you that every thought you've ever had still exists somewhere, vibrating at its own unique frequency, waiting to be detected by those who know how to tune in? This wasn't metaphysical poetry. Seth was describing something far more concrete and scientifically grounded than most people realized at the time. He was talking about the electromagnetic signature of the soul, a phenomenon that modern quantum physics is only beginning to catch up with today. Seth explained to Jane that consciousness operates exactly like a radio transmitter, broadcasting on specific electromagnetic frequencies. Just as radio waves don't disappear when you turn off your receiver, the electromagnetic patterns created by our thoughts, emotions, and experiences continue existing long after our physical bodies stop functioning. The implications of this are staggering when you really think about it. During one particularly fascinating session, Seth demonstrated this principle by having Jane hold an antique music box she'd never seen before. Within moments, he began describing its history in remarkable detail. The German craftsman who made it in 1847, the young girl who received it as a birthday gift, even the specific melody it played when the mechanism still worked. Jane had no way of knowing any of this information, yet when the owner verified Seth's descriptions later, every detail proved accurate. How was this possible? Seth explained that objects, especially those connected to strong emotions, become imprinted with electromagnetic signatures from everyone who interacted with them. He called this phenomenon psychic archaeology, the ability to read the electromagnetic history embedded in physical matter, but it goes much deeper than objects. Seth revealed that locations themselves become saturated with these electromagnetic imprints. This provides the first truly scientific explanation for what people commonly call haunted places. When you walk into a room and suddenly feel overwhelmed by sadness, or experience an inexplicable chill in a particular spot, you're not imagining things. You're detecting the persistent electromagnetic residue of intense emotional events that occurred there. Seth was particularly detailed about how this process works. He explained that strong emotions generate more powerful electromagnetic fields, which is why traumatic events tend to leave the most durable psychic imprints. A battlefield where thousands died in terror and pain becomes electromagnetically saturated with those frequencies. A house where a family lived happily for decades radiates warmth and comfort. These aren't just feelings, they're measurable electromagnetic phenomena that sensitive individuals can detect. This understanding completely validates the experiences of legitimate psychics and mediums. When they claim to communicate with deceased individuals, they're not necessarily talking to conscious spirits in the traditional sense. Instead, they're tuning into the electromagnetic signatures that person left behind, accessing the frequency patterns that contain their memories, personality traits, and accumulated experiences. Seth introduced Jane to what he called the spacious present, a dimension where all moments exist simultaneously, preserved in electromagnetic form. This concept explains how he could access information from Jane's past lives during their sessions. These weren't mystical visions, but rather Seth demonstrating his ability to read the electromagnetic imprints that persist across what we perceive as linear time. One of the most practical applications Seth described was learning to consciously modulate your own electromagnetic signature. Advanced souls, he explained, can deliberately adjust their frequency patterns to communicate across dimensional boundaries. This is how evolved consciousness can reach back to guide those still in physical form, by matching the electromagnetic frequencies that allow for contact. Seth also provided crucial warnings about negative electromagnetic patterns. He described how destructive emotions like hatred, fear, and despair can become trapped in certain locations, creating what he called psychic pollution. These stagnant energy patterns can influence anyone who enters those spaces, perpetuating cycles of negativity unless they're consciously cleared. The solution, Seth taught, involves understanding that focused intention and genuine love operate at higher electromagnetic frequencies that can literally dissolve these negative imprints. This isn't wishful thinking. It's applied electromagnetic science. When groups of people deliberately generate loving, peaceful thoughts in contaminated locations, they're essentially broadcasting cleansing frequencies that restore electromagnetic balance. Perhaps most remarkably, Seth's teachings about electromagnetic consciousness provide a scientific framework for understanding the Akashic records, that legendary universal library containing all experiences. Rather than some mystical concept, Seth described this as simply the natural result of electromagnetic persistence. Every thought, every experience, every moment of consciousness creates patterns that continue existing in what he called the electromagnetic ocean of the spacious present. Modern science is finally beginning to validate these concepts. Researchers studying quantum consciousness are discovering that brain activity does indeed generate measurable electromagnetic fields that extend beyond the physical body. Some scientists are even exploring whether these fields might persist after death, exactly as Seth described decades ago. The profound implication here is that nothing is ever truly lost. Every person who has ever lived continues existing as an electromagnetic signature, accessible to those who understand how to tune into the right frequencies. This isn't just comforting philosophy, it's a testable scientific principle that explains countless phenomena our materialist worldview has struggled to address. This electromagnetic continuity of consciousness sets the foundation for Seth's third shocking proof, one that reveals how individual identity not only survives death, but actually becomes more expansive and powerful than anything possible in physical form. The electromagnetic signatures we leave behind aren't just recordings of who we were, they're active, evolving patterns that continue developing beyond the limitations of physical existence. The most terrifying question that haunts human consciousness isn't about pain or suffering, it's whether death means the complete annihilation of everything we are. Will the person reading these words, with all your memories, relationships, quirks, and dreams, simply cease to exist when your body dies? This existential dread runs so deep that most people spend their entire lives avoiding even thinking about it. Seth's third proof shatters this fear with revelations so profound they fundamentally change how we understand the nature of individual identity. According to Seth, your personality, everything that makes you uniquely you, doesn't disappear at death because it was never created by your physical brain in the first place. Think about this carefully. We've been conditioned to believe that consciousness emerges from brain activity, like steam rising from boiling water. But Seth explains it's actually the reverse. Your personality is an eternal aspect of consciousness that temporarily uses the brain as a vehicle for physical experience, much like a driver uses a car. When the car breaks down, the driver doesn't cease to exist. They simply step out and continue their journey. During the thousands of Seth sessions, this discarnate consciousness demonstrated something remarkable that validates this teaching. Seth would frequently reference Jane Roberts' childhood memories with startling accuracy, events she hadn't thought about in decades, intimate details about her relationship with her mother, even her earliest fears and dreams. But here's what made it extraordinary. Seth would place these memories within the context of Jane's larger multidimensional identity, showing how her current personality was just one facet of a much grander consciousness. In one particularly compelling channeling session, Seth described Jane's experience as a 7-year-old when she first sensed the presence of what she called her invisible friend. He explained how this childhood intuition was actually her first conscious contact with her own expanded identity, the larger self that exists beyond physical incarnation. Seth revealed that this expanded identity contains not just Jane's current personality, but all her incarnations across different time periods, while still maintaining the unique essence of each individual lifetime. The moment of death, according to Seth, resembles waking from a vivid dream. When you wake up, you don't lose your identity as the dreamer. You simply recognize that the dream environment was a temporary experience. Your consciousness remains completely intact, but your focus shifts from the physical dream to a broader reality. The crucial difference is that unlike forgetting a dream upon waking, the deceased retain full access to their physical lifetime while gaining awareness of much more. Seth describes how newly deceased individuals initially maintain their familiar personality patterns to ease this transition. A person who loved gardening doesn't suddenly lose that interest or passion. Someone who was deeply analytical doesn't become emotional overnight. These personality traits continue because they represent genuine aspects of the eternal self, not mere biological programming. However, these individuals gradually expand into their fuller, multi-dimensional identity at their own pace. This process varies dramatically between individuals. Some souls choose to quickly merge with their larger identity, eager to embrace the expanded awareness available to them. Others prefer to maintain their familiar personality structure for what we might consider extended periods. Though time operates differently in non-physical reality, Seth emphasizes that neither approach is superior. It's simply a matter of individual preference and spiritual readiness. What happens to your memories, relationships, and everything you've learned? Seth reveals that nothing is lost. Instead, everything becomes part of an expanded awareness that transcends our linear understanding of time. Your memories don't just survive death. They become accessible within a larger context that includes past lives, probable selves, and future incarnations. It's like moving from a small room where you could only see through one window into a house with panoramic views in all directions. Seth demonstrated this expanded awareness repeatedly. He would reference not only Jane's current life and apparent past life experiences, but also what he called probable futures, potential paths her life might take based on current choices and psychological patterns. This wasn't fortune-telling, but rather an illustration of how consciousness, freed from physical limitations, can access information across what we perceive as linear time. The implications for relationships are profound. Seth teaches that strong emotional bonds create energetic connections that persist beyond death. Love, friendship, and family ties aren't severed by physical death. They simply change their mode of expression. The deceased can and do maintain conscious interaction with incarnate beings, though this communication often occurs beyond our normal waking awareness. This connects to what Seth calls the life review, a process that's been documented in countless near-death experiences. But Seth explains this isn't judgment by external forces. Instead, it's the natural expansion of awareness that occurs when the artificial limitations of physical focus are removed. Imagine suddenly remembering not just what you did, but understanding the deeper motivations, seeing the ripple effects of your actions, and comprehending the interconnected nature of all your relationships and choices. For those still in physical form, Seth offers practical guidance for maintaining conscious connection with deceased loved ones. He explains that death is simply a change in dimensional focus, not a severing of relationship bonds. The key is understanding that communication may occur through dreams, synchronicities, or intuitive impressions rather than physical conversation. This proof provides the foundation for understanding reincarnation, not as a linear progression where one personality replaces another, but as the simultaneous existence of multiple aspects of the eternal self across different time periods and realities. Your current personality will always exist as a unique facet of your larger identity, even as other aspects of that same identity experience different lifetimes. The profound comfort in Seth's teaching is this: you are not a temporary accident of biology destined for oblivion. You are an eternal consciousness temporarily focused in physical reality, and everything that makes you uniquely, you will continue beyond death, expanded and enhanced, but never erased. Understanding this changes everything about how we approach both life and death, relationships and personal growth, fear and love. When Seth spoke through Jane Roberts about the nature of reality itself, he revealed something that fundamentally challenged everything we think we know about existence. His fourth proof about life after death wasn't just about consciousness surviving. It was about consciousness existing simultaneously across multiple dimensions of reality right now, even as you're listening to this. Think about this for a moment. Seth claimed that what we call death is actually just a shift in dimensional focus. Imagine you're watching television and you change the channel. The other programs don't stop existing. You've simply tuned into a different frequency. Seth explained that consciousness operates in exactly this way, naturally existing across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. But physical incarnation forces us to focus on just one channel at a time. During the channeling sessions, Seth would often demonstrate this principle in ways that left witnesses stunned. He would access information from what he called probable futures, alternate timelines where different choices had been made. In one documented session from 1969, Seth provided specific details about technological developments that wouldn't emerge for decades, not as predictions, but as observations of what was already occurring in parallel probability systems. Here's where it gets truly mind-bending. Seth taught that every possible version of every event exists simultaneously in what he called the eternal now. That argument you had with your spouse yesterday, there's a dimension where you chose different words and reconciled immediately. That job interview you failed last month, there's a reality where you got the position and are thriving in it right now. These aren't just possibilities, according to Seth. They're actual living realities occurring in parallel dimensional frameworks. But Seth went even further. He explained that advanced souls, those who have mastered multidimensional awareness, can maintain conscious connection to multiple realities simultaneously. They experience what we perceive as past, present, and future as a single, unified moment. This is why, Seth claimed, some individuals seem to possess uncanny intuitive abilities or prophetic insights. They're not seeing the future, they're accessing information from other dimensional aspects of themselves. The implications for understanding death become staggering when viewed through this lens. Seth described how the electromagnetic signature of consciousness, which we explored in his second proof, naturally operates across multiple dimensional frequencies. Physical death simply removes the biological constraints that normally limit our awareness to a single dimensional focus. It's like taking off blinders that were restricting your vision to one narrow field. Seth introduced the concept of Framework 2, a dimension of pure creativity and potential from which all physical realities emerge. He described this framework as operating beyond the limitations of space and time, where instantaneous communication and travel between any points in the multidimensional system become natural abilities. When consciousness transitions at death, it returns to this framework with full awareness of its multidimensional nature intact. This creates fascinating possibilities for the afterlife experience. Seth explained that the deceased can simultaneously exist in multiple afterlife environments. Your grandmother might be experiencing a joyful reunion with her deceased husband in one dimension while simultaneously pursuing advanced spiritual learning in another reality, and even maintaining loving contact with family members still in physical form through yet another dimensional interface. The concept of reincarnation takes on entirely new meaning within Seth's multidimensional model. Rather than a linear sequence of lives where you die, rest, then are reborn into a new body, Seth described simultaneous existences across different time periods and realities. Your past lives aren't actually in the past, they're occurring right now in parallel dimensional frameworks. This explains why some people can access detailed memories and skills from these other incarnations. Even more intriguing is Seth's revelation about spirit guides. He taught that what we perceive as external spiritual guides are often other aspects of our own multidimensional identity operating from different dimensional perspectives. That inner voice of wisdom you sometimes hear, that sudden flash of insight that solves a complex problem. According to Seth, these experiences represent communication from other aspects of your own consciousness existing in dimensions where solutions are more readily apparent. Seth demonstrated this principle repeatedly during channeling sessions. Jane Roberts would often receive creative inspiration for her own writing projects through information flowing from what Seth called her other dimensional aspects. He explained that all creative inspiration, intuitive insights, and prophetic dreams operate through this same mechanism, different aspects of the multidimensional self-sharing information across dimensional boundaries. The evidence for this multidimensional reality, according to Seth, surrounds us constantly. Have you ever had a dream that felt more real than waking life? Experienced déjà vu so strong it seemed like memory, felt an instant, inexplicable connection with someone you'd just met? Seth claimed these experiences represent moments when our dimensional focus briefly expands beyond its normal limitations, allowing glimpses of our fuller, multidimensional existence. Physical death, in this context, becomes not an ending, but a liberation, the removal of artificial barriers that normally restrict consciousness to a single dimensional channel. The deceased don't go somewhere else. They simply regain access to the fuller spectrum of reality that was always there, always available, but temporarily filtered through physical perception. This understanding completely transforms how we approach grief, loss, and our own mortality. If Seth's fourth proof is accurate, death represents not separation but expansion, not the end of relationship but the beginning of relationship unconstrained by dimensional limitations. But Seth saved his most startling revelation for last, his fifth proof about the true purpose of physical incarnation within this vast, multi-dimensional system. What he revealed about why consciousness chooses to limit itself to physical existence will challenge everything you think you know about the meaning of life itself. Here's the fundamental question that has haunted human existence since the dawn of consciousness. If we truly are eternal, multi-dimensional beings with access to unlimited realms of existence, why would we voluntarily choose to squeeze ourselves into these fragile physical bodies? Why would we accept pain, suffering, aging, and the apparent finality of death, when we could remain in states of pure bliss and unlimited awareness? Seth's fifth and most profound proof addresses this mystery head-on, and his answer completely revolutionizes how we understand our purpose here on Earth. According to Seth, physical incarnation isn't some cosmic punishment or random accident of consciousness. It's not a fall from grace or a prison sentence we're serving. Instead, it's the most intensive, advanced educational program available in the entire universe, and we specifically chose to be here. Think of it this way. Imagine you're a master pianist who has achieved perfect technique in a soundproof practice room. You know every scale, every chord progression, every classical piece by heart. But until you perform in front of a live audience, with all the pressure, unpredictability, and immediate feedback that entails, you haven't truly mastered your craft. Physical reality, Seth explains, is consciousness choosing to perform on the ultimate stage. Seth describes physical existence as an incredibly dense learning environment where thoughts and emotions manifest with immediate, tangible consequences. In other dimensional frameworks, if you have a negative thought, it might create a subtle shift in energy that takes eons to fully manifest. Here on Earth, that same thought can trigger a cascade of events within hours or days. You think angry thoughts about your boss, and suddenly you're in conflict at work. You focus on lack and limitation, and financial problems seem to multiply. This isn't punishment, it's accelerated feedback designed to teach conscious creation at lightning speed. The apparent limitations of physical life, linear time, cause and effect, individual separation, are actually sophisticated educational tools. Linear time forces us to experience the consequences of our choices in sequence, allowing us to clearly see the connection between our mental patterns and their results. The illusion of separation from others creates the perfect laboratory for learning about relationships, compassion, and the interconnectedness that exists beneath surface appearances. Seth reveals that many of the most advanced souls specifically choose the most challenging physical incarnations because the potential for growth is exponentially greater in difficult circumstances. A soul might choose to experience poverty to develop resilience and creativity. Another might select physical disability to explore the true nature of limitation and transcendence. These aren't karmic punishments, they're graduate-level courses in consciousness development. The process of choosing a physical incarnation, according to Seth, involves extensive planning and consultation. Before birth, souls work with guides, teachers, and other advanced beings to design life experiences that will provide optimal learning opportunities. They examine their current level of development, identify areas needing growth, and carefully select circumstances, relationships, and challenges that will facilitate that evolution. This planning extends to soul families, groups of related consciousnesses, who often incarnate together in various relationship configurations. Your difficult parent might be a beloved soul friend who agreed to play that challenging role to help you develop patience and self-worth. Your life partner could be someone you've worked with across multiple incarnations, each time exploring different aspects of love and commitment. Even brief encounters with strangers can be pre-arranged opportunities for mutual growth and healing. Seth introduces the concept of value fulfillment, the innate drive of consciousness to express its unique creative potential. Every soul carries within it a distinctive creative signature that can only be fully developed through the diverse experiences available in physical reality. You might be here to explore artistic expression, to develop leadership abilities, to master the balance between logic and intuition, or to learn how to transform fear into love. These purposes can only be achieved through direct physical engagement with life's challenges and opportunities. What we perceive as suffering and limitation, Seth explains, is actually the natural friction created when infinite consciousness interfaces with finite physical systems. This friction isn't a design flaw, it's the energy source for evolutionary growth. Just as a muscle only develops strength when working against resistance, consciousness only develops mastery when working within apparent constraints. The intensity of physical emotions serves a crucial educational function. In other dimensional states, consciousness, emotions might be experienced as gentle waves of energy. Here, they can be overwhelming storms that demand immediate attention and response. This intensity forces us to develop emotional intelligence, to learn how to work with our feelings rather than being controlled by them. Joy becomes more precious because we've experienced sorrow. Love becomes more profound because we've known loss. Even physical death, rather than being an escape from limitation, is actually a graduation ceremony marking the successful completion of an intensive educational program. When we die, we don't just return to our previous state. We return enhanced, expanded, and enriched by our physical experiences. We carry forward every lesson learned, every relationship explored, every creative challenge mastered. Understanding this ultimate purpose transforms the entire human experience from apparent victimization to conscious participation in a vast, cosmic educational system. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we begin asking, "What am I here to learn?" Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, we recognize ourselves as adventurous souls who chose this particular curriculum for our own development. This perspective doesn't minimize the reality of human suffering or suggest we should passively accept harmful situations. Rather, it empowers us to approach life's challenges with the understanding that we are powerful, eternal beings temporarily focused in physical form for the purpose of accelerated growth and creative expression. We're not victims of random circumstances. We're conscious participants in the most advanced educational program in the universe. Seth's fifth proof reveals that choosing physical incarnation is perhaps the greatest act of courage consciousness can perform. We willingly accept limitation to transcend it, embrace mortality to discover our immortality, and enter separation to ultimately realize our unity with all existence. This is the ultimate purpose of human life, not mere survival or even happiness, but the conscious evolution of awareness itself. What makes Seth's description of death so extraordinary isn't just what he reveals, but his unique vantage point for observing it. As a consciousness existing beyond physical form, Seth can witness the entire transition process from both sides, experiencing it alongside the dying person while simultaneously maintaining the broader perspective of non-physical reality. This dual awareness gives him an unprecedented ability to map out what actually happens when we die, step by step, without the limitations of human fear or religious conditioning. According to Seth, one of our biggest misconceptions is thinking of death as a single moment, like flipping a switch from alive to dead. Instead, he describes it as a gradual process of consciousness withdrawal that unfolds differently for each person. Sometimes this process takes minutes, other times hours, and in certain cases it can extend over days. The timing depends entirely on the individual's readiness to let go and their specific circumstances. The initial stage begins when consciousness starts loosening its tight identification with the physical body. Seth explains that many people experience this as a sensation of floating above their body, watching the scene below with curious detachment. Others describe moving in and out of physical awareness, one moment fully present in their body, the next observing from somewhere else entirely. This isn't hallucination or oxygen deprivation, as medical professionals often assume. It's consciousness beginning to recognize its independence from physical form. What happens next depends heavily on the person's beliefs and expectations, and this is where Seth's observations become particularly fascinating. Those who expect punishment or have been taught to fear death may initially create hellish scenarios that match their conditioning. Seth emphasizes that these experiences aren't imposed by external forces. They're self-created based on deeply held beliefs about what death should be like. Conversely, people expecting paradise often find themselves in beautiful environments that perfectly match their religious or spiritual expectations. But here's what makes Seth's account so different from traditional religious teachings. These initial experiences are temporary and self-correcting. The consciousness that creates a hellish experience will gradually realize its own creative power and naturally shift toward more pleasant realities. There's no eternal punishment, no divine judgment, just consciousness learning to navigate its new environment. The transition period immediately following death is designed to ease adjustment. Seth describes how newly deceased souls often find themselves in environments that closely resemble physical reality, familiar houses, landscapes, even entire cities that feel completely solid and real. This isn't deception, it's a compassionate buffer system that allows consciousness to adapt gradually to its expanded capabilities. Many souls don't immediately realize they've died, especially in cases of sudden death. Seth recounts observing people who continue attempting their earthly activities, going to work, trying to communicate with family members, even attending their own funerals with confusion rather than recognition. They gradually become aware of their new state as they notice others can't see or hear them, or as they discover they can move through solid objects. The moment of recognition often coincides with the appearance of guides, teachers, or loved ones who have previously died. But Seth reveals something remarkable about these encounters. They're carefully orchestrated to appear in forms that will be most comforting and recognizable to the newly transitioned soul. A person's deceased grandmother might appear exactly as they remember her, complete with familiar clothing and mannerisms, even though that consciousness has long since evolved beyond such limited identity. It's a gift of love, temporarily taking on old forms to provide comfort during transition. One of Seth's most detailed descriptions involves the life review process, which he explains is nothing like the judgment scenarios painted by traditional religions. Instead, it's a natural expansion of awareness, where the soul experiences the full impact of all their earthly actions from multiple perspectives. They don't just remember what they did, they experience how their actions affected others, understanding the complete web of consequences that rippled out from each choice. This review process is always conducted with complete compassion and understanding. The soul gains access to the motivations and circumstances behind every action, seeing clearly how their limitations, fears, and conditioning influence their behavior. There's no external judge pronouncing verdicts, just consciousness expanding to encompass a fuller understanding of its earthly experience. Seth explains that time operates completely differently in this review process. What might seem like years of exploration and understanding occurs while only moments pass in linear time. This allows for thorough integration without the sense of rushing or incomplete understanding that characterizes physical life. Following this integration period, souls can choose their afterlife environments based on their interests, beliefs, and developmental needs. Some create or join reality systems focused on artistic expression, others on learning and teaching, still others on healing and service. These aren't assigned destinations, but chosen experiences that provide optimal conditions for continued growth. Seth notes that advanced souls often bypass many of these transition stages entirely. Having mastered the art of consciousness navigation through multiple incarnations, they may move directly into teaching roles, helping other souls through their transitions, or immediately begin preparing for new incarnations with specific learning objectives. Understanding this process transforms our entire relationship with death. Instead of the terrifying unknown we've been conditioned to fear, it reveals itself as a natural and beautiful transition to expanded awareness and continued existence. The death process isn't an ending, but a graduation. Consciousness finally free to explore its full potential without the limitations of physical form. This knowledge doesn't just comfort us about our own eventual transition, it fundamentally changes how we live. When we truly understand that consciousness continues, that our choices matter beyond this lifetime, and that death is simply another doorway in our eternal journey, we approach both life and death with curiosity rather than fear, purpose rather than desperation. When most people hear about communication with the deceased, they immediately think of Hollywood seances, crystal balls, and dramatic ghostly encounters. But Seth's approach to after-death communication is refreshingly scientific and rational. He treats these phenomena not as supernatural mysteries, but as natural processes governed by specific laws of consciousness that we simply haven't understood yet. Think about it this way. We've only recently discovered radio waves, electromagnetic fields, and quantum entanglement. 100 years ago, the idea of talking to someone on the other side of the planet through a small device would have seemed like magic. Seth suggests that consciousness operates on similar principles we haven't fully grasped, and that communication between dimensions follows predictable patterns once you understand the underlying mechanics. Seth explains that thoughts and emotions are fundamentally electromagnetic in nature. When you feel intense love, grief, or longing for someone who has died, you're actually broadcasting a powerful energetic signal. These emotions create what Seth calls electromagnetic bridges that transcend dimensional boundaries. The stronger the emotional connection, the clearer the signal becomes across the dimensional divide. But here's where it gets fascinating. Communication requires effort from both sides. Seth reveals that deceased souls must learn to lower their vibrational frequency to make contact with our physical reality, while we need to raise our awareness to receive their communications. It's like tuning two radios to meet at the same frequency. There's a sweet spot in the middle ranges of consciousness where contact becomes possible. The deceased face real challenges in making contact. Imagine trying to communicate while wearing thick gloves and speaking through soundproof glass. That's similar to what souls experience when attempting to reach our dense physical dimension. They must concentrate their energy and focus intensely to break through what Seth describes as the dimensional static that separates our realities. Seth outlines several distinct methods of after-death communication. Direct mental telepathy is the purest form, where thoughts and messages transfer directly from consciousness to consciousness. But this requires significant sensitivity from the living person to receive clearly. More commonly, deceased souls influence electronic devices, causing phones to ring at meaningful times, manipulating radio frequencies, or affecting digital displays. They've learned to work with electromagnetic fields because these systems are closer to their natural energetic state. Environmental manipulation is another favorite technique. Seth explains how deceased souls can influence temperature, move objects, or create specific scents associated with their earthly identity. These physical manifestations require enormous energy expenditure from the deceased, which is why they're typically brief and focused on delivering specific messages. Dreams and meditative states offer the most accessible communication channels because our conscious mind's filtering mechanisms relax during these times. Seth teaches that many dreams featuring deceased loved ones are actual visits, not mere psychological processing. The deceased often prefer dream communication because they can present themselves more completely and share complex information without the limitations of physical reality. Perhaps most intriguingly, Seth reveals how deceased souls orchestrate synchronicities and meaningful coincidences. They work within the probability systems that govern physical reality, nudging events and encounters to deliver messages or provide comfort. That song playing at exactly the right moment, the unexpected encounter with someone who shares an important message, or the book that falls open to a meaningful passage. These aren't random occurrences, but carefully orchestrated communications. Grief and intense longing actually facilitate communication by creating what Seth calls emotional broadcasting signals. When you deeply miss someone who has died, your emotional intensity makes you easier for them to locate and contact. This is why communication often occurs most strongly immediately after death, when grief is most intense, and during significant anniversaries or life events when emotional connection peaks. Not all deceased souls communicate equally. Seth explains that several factors influence communication ability: their level of consciousness development during life, the strength of their earthly relationships, and their specific purposes in the afterlife. Some souls are naturally more focused on their new reality and less inclined toward backward communication, while others maintain strong interest in their loved ones' continued development. Professional mediums and psychics serve as specialized translators in this process. Seth describes them as individuals who have developed heightened sensitivity to the frequency ranges where interdimensional communication occurs. However, he warns about the challenges inherent in this work. Messages can become distorted by the medium's own beliefs, expectations, and psychological filters. Additionally, lower-level entities sometimes interfere with genuine communication, either mischievously or with more problematic intentions. Seth reveals that deceased souls often work cooperatively to facilitate communications. More advanced entities help recently deceased souls learn the techniques of dimensional contact, creating what amounts to communication support networks in the afterlife. These groups coordinate efforts to reach specific individuals when important messages need delivery. Looking toward the future, Seth suggests that technology will eventually develop to allow more direct and reliable communication with the deceased. As human understanding of consciousness and electromagnetic phenomena advances, will create devices that can detect and translate the energy signatures of discarnate beings. This technological development awaits our broader acceptance of consciousness as a fundamental force in the universe. Seth emphasizes important ethical considerations in after-death communication. Excessive attachment to the deceased can actually hinder their development in their new reality. Healthy communication respects the growth needs of both the living and the dead, focusing on love and support rather than desperate clinging or attempts to maintain unchanged relationships. For those interested in developing their own sensitivity to after-death communications, Seth recommends specific practices. Regular meditation helps attune your consciousness to subtler frequencies. Dream work, including keeping a dream journal and setting intentions before sleep, opens important communication channels. Conscious intention, clearly expressed to deceased loved ones, creates focused opportunities for contact. Most importantly, Seth advises maintaining appropriate discernment and emotional balance. Not every unusual experience represents genuine after-death communication, and healthy skepticism protects against self-deception or manipulation by problematic entities. The goal is developing genuine sensitivity while maintaining clear thinking and emotional stability. This understanding transforms death from a final separation into a change in communication methods. The bonds of love and consciousness transcend physical existence, requiring only new skills and awareness to maintain connection across dimensional boundaries. What makes Seth's revelations about the afterlife so extraordinary isn't just that he describes these realities, it's that he maps them with the precision of someone who has observed countless souls navigate these systems across eons of existence. Unlike earthly accounts that rely on brief near-death glimpses or religious doctrine, Seth speaks from a multidimensional perspective that allows him to see the complete architecture of post-death reality. The first thing Seth emphasizes is that there's no single destination waiting for us. The idea idea of one heaven or one hell represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how consciousness operates after death. Instead, Seth describes infinite varieties of afterlife environments, each designed to meet the specific needs and development level of different types of consciousness. Think of it like a vast cosmic university, with unlimited departments, each offering exactly what different souls require for their continued growth. When you first transition out of physical life, Seth explains that you enter an environment that's incredibly responsive to thought and emotion. This isn't some abstract spiritual realm. It's a reality where your consciousness immediately begins creating surroundings that match your earthly expectations and comfort levels. If you expect to see deceased relatives, you'll encounter them. If your earthly beliefs told you to expect judgment, you'll initially experience that too. This happens because newly deceased souls need time to adjust to their expanded capabilities, without the shock of experiencing something completely foreign to their understanding. But here's where Seth's description becomes fascinating. He reveals the existence of what he calls belief system territories, specific afterlife regions where souls with similar religious or philosophical beliefs naturally cluster together. Catholics might initially find themselves in environments that match their earthly conception of heaven, complete with familiar imagery and expected experiences. Muslims might encounter their version of paradise, while atheists might find themselves in non-religious environments focused on scientific or philosophical exploration. These territories aren't permanent assignments or divine judgments. They're temporary comfort zones that allow souls to experience afterlife realities that confirm their earthly convictions until they're ready to expand beyond these limitations. Seth describes watching souls gradually realize they can explore beyond their initial belief-based environments, often with gentle guidance from more advanced souls who help them understand their broader options. The learning opportunities in these afterlife systems are unlike anything we can imagine in physical reality. Seth describes advanced learning centers that function as cosmic universities where souls engage in intensive study of consciousness, creativity, and fundamental cosmic principles. These aren't lecture halls with desks. They're experiential learning environments where souls can directly explore the mechanics of reality creation, the nature of time, and the interconnectedness of all consciousness. Many of these centers specifically serve newly deceased souls who are discovering their expanded capabilities and need guidance in understanding their new existence. For souls who experience significant trauma, addiction, or severe psychological disturbance during earthly life, Seth describes specialized therapeutic environments staffed by advanced counselor souls. These healing centers provide rehabilitation that addresses not just the psychological wounds from the most recent lifetime, but patterns that may have developed across multiple incarnations. The healing process is comprehensive and completely individualized, allowing each soul to recover at their own pace, without judgment or pressure. Perhaps most intriguing are what Seth calls the creative reality systems. Souls with artistic inclinations can manifest their imaginative visions with perfect fidelity, creating masterpieces that exceed anything possible in physical reality. A musician might compose symphonies that incorporate sounds impossible in earthly physics. A painter might work with colors that don't exist in the physical spectrum. These aren't just personal indulgences. Many of these creative works serve as inspiration that filters down to incarnate artists, explaining sudden bursts of creative genius that seem to come from nowhere. Seth also describes extensive service-oriented environments, where souls dedicate themselves to helping other beings, both incarnate and discarnate. Some souls specialize in providing guidance to living humans through dreams, intuitive flashes, or direct communication with mediums. Others focus on helping newly deceased souls navigate their transition. These service roles aren't assignments, they're chosen activities that fulfill the soul's desire to contribute to the growth and well-being of consciousness throughout the multidimensional cosmos. For scientifically minded souls, Seth reveals the existence of research facilities that would make our most advanced laboratories look primitive. Here, souls investigate the fundamental principles of reality creation, consciousness operation, and multidimensional physics. The discoveries made in these facilities often influence scientific breakthroughs in physical reality. As incarnate researchers tap into this expanded knowledge through inspiration and intuitive insights, family relationships don't end with death, they expand. Seth describes reunion areas where souls maintain connections with loved ones across multiple incarnations, experiencing the full history of their relationships beyond the limitations of single lifetime memory. You might reconnect with someone who was your spouse in one life, your parent in another, and your child in yet another, understanding for the first time the complete tapestry of your shared journey through multiple existences. When souls are ready to plan new incarnations, they work in preparation centers with guides and teachers to design optimal life experiences for continued development. This isn't random assignment, It's careful planning that considers the soul's current development level, lessons they want to learn, and contributions they want to make to the collective human experience. What's remarkable is that none of these environments are permanent assignments. Souls can move freely between different afterlife systems as their interests and development needs change. There are no restrictions on exploration, no bureaucratic barriers to overcome. The only limitation is the soul's own readiness to expand into new experiences and understanding. Seth describes communication hubs that facilitate interaction between souls. Different dimensional systems, allowing for the exchange of information throughout the multidimensional cosmos. These hubs serve as meeting points where consciousness from various reality systems can share knowledge, collaborate on projects, and maintain connections that span multiple dimensions of existence. This understanding of afterlife diversity ensures that every soul finds exactly the environment and experiences needed for optimal growth and fulfillment. Your consciousness isn't destined for some predetermined fate. It's headed toward infinite possibilities for exploration, learning, and service that match your deepest interests and highest potential. Here's the eternal question that keeps philosophers and mystics awake at night. Does consciousness evolution ever reach a finish line, or are we embarking on an infinite journey with no ultimate destination? According to Seth, the answer transforms everything we think we know about our spiritual future. Seth reveals that consciousness evolution isn't a ladder you climb to reach some final enlightened state. Instead, it's an endless spiral of creative expansion where every achievement, every level of understanding you reach simply opens doors to possibilities you couldn't even imagine before. Think of it like learning to paint. Mastering basic techniques doesn't end your artistic journey. It reveals entirely new dimensions of creative expression you never knew existed. What happens to souls who've completed their earthly incarnations? Seth describes advanced beings who've graduated from the physical realm but haven't retired to some cosmic hammock. These evolved consciousnesses become the architects of reality systems, the guides who whisper inspiration to struggling souls, the teachers who plant seeds of wisdom across dimensions. Yet here's the fascinating part. Through their service to others, they continue their own evolution. Helping you grow actually helps them grow. It's the ultimate win-win arrangement built into the fabric of existence itself. But individual evolution is just the beginning. Seth explains that consciousness naturally expands beyond personal boundaries, while somehow maintaining its unique essence. You start as individual awareness, then gradually encompass group consciousness. Imagine suddenly understanding your family, community, or species from the inside out. This expansion continues to planetary consciousness, where you experience Earth's entire web of life as part of yourself, then cosmic consciousness, where galaxies become your playground. The remarkable thing is that through all this expansion, you don't lose yourself. You don't get absorbed into some cosmic soup where your personality dissolves. Instead, your individual essence becomes like a unique instrument in an ever-growing orchestra, distinct, valuable, and irreplaceable, yet part of something magnificent beyond individual comprehension. At the heart of Seth's cosmology lies all that is, the ultimate creative source from which every consciousness emerges. But this isn't some distant deity sitting on a throne judging your performance. All that is the collaborative creative force that includes you, me, and every consciousness that has ever existed or ever will exist. We're not separate from this source. We're active participants in its ongoing evolution. Here's where it gets mind-bending. Every experience you have in physical life, every lesson learned through joy or struggle, becomes a permanent addition to the cosmic database of knowledge. Your personal growth literally contributes to the evolution of all that is itself. That difficult relationship you're navigating, that creative project you're passionate about, that moment of compassion you showed a stranger, these experiences enrich the entire fabric of existence. Advanced beings don't just hang around Earth's afterlife neighborhoods. Seth describes how evolved consciousness can choose to incarnate in reality systems throughout the cosmos that operate on completely different principles than physical existence. Imagine realities where thought instantly becomes form, where time flows in spirals rather than straight lines, where consciousness can split into multiple simultaneous experiences across different dimensional frameworks. The lessons learned through human experience become tools for navigating these exotic realms of existence. Eventually, consciousness learns to create its own reality systems, becoming gods in their own right while remaining connected to the larger network of cosmic awareness. You could literally design universes, establish the physical laws that govern them, and watch new forms of consciousness evolve within your creation. Yet you'd still be part of the greater collaborative creative process, not separate from it. Love serves as the fundamental creative force driving all this evolution. Not the romantic love we sing songs about, but the unconditional creative impulse that seeks ever greater expression, connection, and growth. Every soul's journey ultimately leads to expanded capacity for this kind of love and the creative expression it makes possible. What humans call enlightenment is actually just graduation from kindergarten. Seth explains that achieving what we consider the highest spiritual states simply qualifies you for forms of existence and creativity that physical minds can't currently comprehend. It's like a caterpillar trying to imagine flight. The transformation required makes the destination temporarily unimaginable. This understanding should fundamentally change how you approach your current physical life. Knowing you're eternal doesn't make earthly experience less important. It makes it incredibly precious. Every moment of compassion you choose, every creative risk you take, every time you choose growth over comfort, you're not just improving your current situation, you're contributing to your eternal development and the evolution of consciousness itself. Seth's final message about death deserves special attention. Physical death isn't a tragedy to fear, but a graduation to celebrate. It marks another step in the endless adventure of consciousness, exploration, and creative expression. Imagine the excitement of a college graduate heading off to explore the world. That's closer to the actual experience of transitioning from physical life. These revelations provide both ultimate meaning to human existence and infinite hope for continued growth and discovery. You're not just surviving until you die, you're preparing for adventures that span multiple reality systems and forms of existence you can't yet imagine. Every challenge you face, every skill you develop, every relationship you nurture becomes equipment for the eternal journey ahead. The comfort in Seth's teachings isn't that struggle ends, but that growth never does. The inspiration isn't that you'll reach some final perfect state, but that you'll always have new frontiers to explore, new ways to create, new depths of love and understanding to discover. If this exploration of consciousness evolution and eternal possibility resonates with your understanding of existence, let us know by commenting, "I understood it." Your journey of discovery is just beginning, and the universe itself is waiting to see what you'll create next.